like building a house based with cheap materials. You know, it might look the part, but then it's going to start falling apart over time after a couple of years. Sometimes it's just a small tweak in one direction, but it saves you from lots of headaches and lots of pounds. To me, it's too much of a risk to pin my family's livelihood to.
I was learning before I was spending money, so when I started spending money on ads,
that's a dangerous game to play if you're doing this for the first time.
bad idea. Definitely heed our warning on that one.
The most successful dropshippers that we see time and time again come through our program, they Welcome to the Dropship Unlocked podcast. I'm Lewis Smith, the founder of Dropship Unlocked, and with me is our client success coach, James Eardley. Now, when we're not recording the podcast episodes, we're running our own e-commerce businesses and helping aspiring entrepreneurs launch their own high-ticket dropshipping businesses. Keen to build your own 6 or even 7-figure business? My book, The Home Turf Advantage, is your blueprint for launching a profitable online store. Grab your copy at htabook.com today and let's get you started. Now sit back, relax, and let's unlock your potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast.
Today, Lewis and I are going to be discussing a topic that could literally save you thousands on your dropshipping journey. We're talking about the top 5 mistakes that new dropshippers make. Mistakes that can derail your progress and hit your wallet hard.
Yeah, absolutely, James. These mistakes are more common than you might think. But the good news is that with the right approach, they're totally avoidable. So let's jump in and make sure our listeners are set up for success. The goal for this episode is to highlight how making even small adjustments can have a huge impact on your success in dropshipping. So it's about turning those small tweaks into big wins, something that we help our community do every day.
That's right. Sometimes it's just a small tweak in one direction, but it saves you from lots of headaches and lots of pounds and dollars wasted. So a mistake that we see all too often is one that you really highlighted for me because you love using the term dabbling. So it's something we see all too often, as I say, it's people that are dabbling in dropshipping without fully committing to it. So why do you think this is such a costly mistake?
Well, it's something that I think once you've made the change to go from dabbling to committing, you can only really look back on with hindsight and realize the transformation that occurred in that time. I think the easiest way to visualize this, if you're at that early stage and you've not yet fully committed, is that if you treat your business like a side hobby, then that's all it will ever be. It will become this self-fulfilling prophecy. It will remain capped at whatever earning that your comfortable side hustle could bring you. However, when you go all in and it becomes your main business, you give yourself the best shot at success, but also you've removed all of the other excuses. And so because this is your sole focus, you build it up to what you believe your sole focus could earn you. And so when I first started, I think there was a person I spoke with where this became very clear for me. And I was hesitant about putting all my time into something initially because I was very early into the journey, had just learned about dropshipping, wasn't sure, saw all the bad press about low quality products from China and the traditional model. And so wasn't really sure. And I remember I'd started to kind of dabble probably with this like high ticket approach of selling higher priced, higher value items from UK suppliers. And I was just testing the water, seeing how it was going. And we used to rent out a room in our Airbnb in our apartment in London. So we used to have a spare room and we used to have like guests come and stay from time to time. It was quite an interesting way of meeting people who were, traveling around the world. And we had one lady who was there I think she was from America, and she worked as like a PR agent for business owners. So interesting person, had her own business, was very successful. And I was telling her about my side business and my e-commerce business. And I was saying, I'm still working in a job, but I run this business like evenings and weekends. And I felt like I was juggling so much. I remember telling her at the time, I feel like I've got so many plates spinning. And I remember her saying, the day that you go all in on it and you leave your job and you commit to this is the day that you'll free up so much headspace that you'll realize was capped before. And your focus and attention can all go towards one thing and you'll break through and you won't believe what's possible at that stage. And I didn't really understand it when she said it because I thought, well, I'm giving it all my attention I can in the evenings and weekends that I can dedicate to it. But what about all those hours in the daytime that I wasn't? And it was very true. When I look back now, the moment that I left my job, although the business was already up and running, it was generating sales, I'd probably replaced my income already. It was really when it took off in terms of like where I could just pour all my time and energy into it. And I've seen that many of our members at Dropship Unlocked see this same transformation. We see posts in our community where someone will say, today's the day I leave my job because I've replaced my income and now I'm making that switch, that pivot where this now becomes their full-time thing. And at that point, that's when we start to see their results really ramp up because they're all in. They've dived in the pool. Now it's time to swim. And so I think diving in too early can be a mistake. You know, diving in before you can swim, i.e. quitting your job, but before you have replaced your income, is possibly a bit of a dangerous game to play. Some people like the pressure of lighting the fire. It does, however, in my opinion, force you to make quite short-term decisions sometimes. But I know that when I first started, one of my early mistakes was thinking that I could dabble my way through to the type of success I wanted to see with this business in the long term. And it wasn't until I shifted my focus and decided that, no, this was going to be my business. Like this was it. This was going to be my main focus, my main source of income. That's when I think I changed from thinking, now I wonder if I could do it, to believing that it's possible because now I have to make it work. And that's when the progress really started. And so it's like working out once a week, you know, and expecting to see results. Without commitment, the progress is going to be painfully slow, if any at all. So when you're not fully committed, you miss out on these growth opportunities. And I think it all comes down to the simple phrase of you get what you put in, right? Commitment and consistency are going to be crucial for growth, whether it's in business or any skill, right?
Exactly, yeah. The more you put in, the more you get out. And if you treat it like a hobby, you'll be paid like a hobby. If you treat it like a business, you'll be paid like a business. I think the mindset around dabbling comes from trying to avoid risk and trying to protect yourself. Just thinking, oh, I'll just give it a go. I won't go all in because if it doesn't work, then I'm protecting myself and I've not given too much time and effort and thought into it and money into it. But what happens is actually it's more of a risky option to dabble because it's very rare when I hear people talk about, I'm going to get started, but I'm going to see if it works or not. It's very rare that those people actually succeed. So if you're going to be dabbling, as I discovered myself when I first dabbled, it was very, very difficult to see success if you were just seeing if it had worked or if you just had faith or you just hoped that it was going to work and work out if I just put in half an hour here, half an hour there. But eventually that's never going to lead to success. And so that's a more risky strategy to take. If you've identified something that you know fits your ideal lifestyle and you really want to give something a go, then that's when you go all in and you commit. And then that's when you see success. So it's a less risky strategy, I believe. But it's that protection that we want to put up ahead of ourselves. We want to put a barrier in front of ourselves before we get started because we're always thinking of protecting the downside. But it just holds you back. I mean, the obvious story that I remember always comes up when I think about dabbling and not going for it is the idea of burning the ships. So when the Spanish fleet commander landed on an island and he turned around and told all his troops to burn the ships behind them, so they had no option to carry on and invade that territory. They had no option to turn back. Inevitably, they would win that war and they would take that territory because they gave themselves no other option. And there's something very successful about that mindset. And it's the mindset that I had to take as well. Once I realized it was dropshipping that was going to be my route to financial freedom, then I set up a limited company, business bank account. I put my time and effort into it on weekends, on evenings. I knew it was going to be my way to success. But I had to have that moment, which can just be done in a moment, where I decided that this is going to be my route and it was going to take it seriously. And then the results were so different compared to when I was dabbling with Chinese products from Facebook ads before. The next big mistake that we see a lot of people make, Lewis, is choosing the products that they're going to be selling based on emotion or a hunch rather than actual data. What's the danger here then for people if they're just choosing products to sell based on emotion?
Yeah, the thing to remember is just because you love a product doesn't mean that the market does. So we have to separate our own biases, our own preconceptions, our own assumptions from the facts. And it's a hard thing to do because the nature of an assumption and a bias is that they're kind of internally hidden within our mind. You know, they're not something that we can immediately point to and say, oh, I have a bias towards this. Because the nature of the bias is it's kind of is under the radar. So just because you love a product and you think, hey, this would be really popular. I love these, therefore there must be a huge market for them. Could be that it's quite, could be that it's too niche. And equally, just saying like, I think this is going to be huge, but having nothing else other than a gut feeling to base that upon, to me, it's too much of a risk to pin my family's livelihood to. I want to know that there is stable, proven, consistent demand. It's a bit like, imagine you're a chef and you're like, right, I'm going to prepare this unbelievable feast, this huge banquet. I'm going to get the barbecue grill out and create all these like nice racks of ribs and steaks and all of this great stuff. And you show up to the party and they're like, oh, it's a vegan party. And you're like, oh dear, I did not do my research here. Like you've gone all in. You were so passionate about the thing. And then you realize there's just no demand for what you're trying to sell, right? It doesn't matter if it's your favorite. If the audience and the market doesn't want it, doesn't matter. You're not going to sell anything. So market research to me is non-negotiable. Like I start with the data, start with the research, and later I can overlay emotion on it once I have proven concepts that I say, yeah, that stacks up from a data standpoint, but so do these other 4 options. Which one do I like? Which one? Because there is a place for gut feeling in business. I'm not saying you have to just be like a rational robot and do nothing but make rational decisions. Sometimes it's quite nice to say, no, but I really feel that would be good and I'd lean into that and I'd be good. Sometimes that inner voice is worth listening to, but don't let it be the dominant voice that guides you down a rabbit hole that takes you 2 years to discover that it's a non-starter in the first place. Decisions need to be backed by data, not just feelings. The most successful dropshippers that we see time and time again come through our program, they follow the data. They follow the 9-step validation criteria that we have, ensuring that there's proven demand before they invest. And by the way, market demand is just one of the steps that we validate a market on. So we've done episodes in the past where we talk about all of the other steps for niche selection. That's a whole separate episode. But yeah, market demand is really figuring out how many people are there at the barbecue that are going to want to eat the type of food that I'm going to make, or what do the people at the barbecue want? Now let me base the food I'm going to create around that. So think of it as well like maybe investing in the stock market. You're thinking, right, I'm going to invest. You wouldn't just go and put your money into a company's stock just because you like their logo. That's the level of like superficial decision we're talking about here. If you say, I've got a good feeling because I like their yellow and blue logo. It's like, at least look at the numbers if you're going to do that. At least look at what's their track record, like what's the news articles related to that company. Like do some some deeper level research and try and figure out if there's anything more to it. So just a couple of examples there, but that's why it can be dangerous. Yeah, hopefully that drives the point home.
Absolutely. I mean, it comes from trying to take a shortcut. Certainly what I was doing initially when I wanted to start dropshipping, I just wanted to find a product and start running ads. And there's almost like an impatience to get sales. But what that leads to is you do all of the learning then after you're spending money, and you learn because your ad account is telling you that you're not making any sales. And so your bank account dips because you're learning after you're running ads. Whereas if you're a bit more patient, and I had to learn to be more patient and do some research up front, then when I started running ads, I knew the products were already in demand and already selling, so that I was learning before I was spending money. So when I started spending money on ads, I could see results straight away. So it's just about patience, I think. I needed to teach myself that. And also, I think people try and go into products that they are passionate about, or perhaps they bought it recently. If you've been out and recently bought a new tent or a new load of camping gear, and you kind of just convince yourself, well, if I did it, there must be thousands of people doing it. But there's always needs to be that period of checking the data, making sure that it all makes sense and lines up. And then when you do start investing in ads, building a store, taking time to sign suppliers, it's all validated in that those products are selling already. So that's a big one that really cost me thousands when I just started to pick products off the shelf in AliExpress virtually and decide that I was going to start selling random things because I just thought the margins were good and they were available. So bad idea. Definitely heed our warning on that one. I think we've done quite a few episodes on finding products based on data. So check out the backlog of Dropship Unlocked podcast episodes. And also Lewis has built a dropshipping store from scratch in a YouTube series. So if you just search for building a store from scratch on the Dropship Unlocked YouTube channel, you'll find that, and Lewis shows you exactly how he finds products based on data to start dropshipping. So another common mistake that we need to touch on today is that we see entrepreneurs and new dropshippers focusing on selling low ticket items. Why is this a bad strategy?
Well, low ticket, firstly, when we say that, we just mean low ticket price. So low price, we're talking items below £100, for example, 20, 30, £5, whatever, like a lower price, fast moving, high volume product that are kind of more impulse buys. And that's the traditional model. But with low ticket items, they require such a high volume of sales to see the same net profit at the end of it, that it's just like the numbers don't pan out for you as a first time e-commerce entrepreneur. If this is your first venture, I mean, it can be done, but you're looking at trying to make a profit probably on your second or even third sale. And that's a dangerous game to play if you're doing this for the first time. So there's a much, much easier way to make this work and the numbers pan out so that you make a profit on day one of your sale. So imagine trying to, you've got this swimming pool in front of you. You're like, right, we need to fill this empty swimming pool up. You're looking at it and you're thinking, what's the fastest way? You could get a teaspoon and go to the tap and then just fill up a teaspoon and go and like pour a teaspoon at a time into the swimming pool. Or you could just get a fire hose and just fill it up that way, right? The end result will be the same. You'll make the same profit eventually, but how many more teaspoons full of water are you going to need to pour into the pool to get the same output? That's the point. Like, we're not saying here that you can't fill a swimming pool with a teaspoon. You can, but do you really want to? Like, there's no reward at the end of it that is greater. It's just that you end up with a lot more work to do, a lot more customers to have to tend to, a lot more orders to fulfill, a lot more returns to deal with, a lot more complaint. I think that's the main problem with the low ticket items. And the other thing is that it's very, very saturated, because there's this kind of psychological concept that people assume that because the items are cheaper and there's a lower barrier to entry, that they should just do that. But because the masses think like that, it makes it very hard to stand out, because everyone's doing it, because they all think, oh, I couldn't sell products that are £1,000. Maybe it's to do with like a deeper like self-worth belief or something. But I think I'd encourage you, try and break through that glass wall, because it's not real. It takes the same amount of effort to sell a product for you as a seller, a £2,000 product, as it does to sell a £20 product. You've uploaded the photos and the videos to Shopify. You've uploaded the product description. Maybe you had to take a phone call to close the £2,000 sale, but your virtual assistant can do that. So you're not actually taking any calls. And so the danger with the low ticket items is that you're competing with so many other sellers. It becomes a race to the bottom on pricing. It's like if you're a busy music festival and I've got these water bottles I'm going to sell, and there's another person there selling the same water bottles, and then another person, and they drop their price from £10 down to £7. And then you're like, I've got to do mine at £6 now. And then the person over there drops theirs to £5. And now you're like, well, I've got to do £4 to compete. But I buy these at trade price for £3, so I'm hardly making any profit now. And so suddenly you've got no leverage, because you weren't selling any when you were double the price as everyone else. So you had to drop your price to compete. And suddenly you're making no sales, or you're making no profit. Maybe you're making sales, but what's the point if you do it now? The difference with higher priced items, so high ticket items as we call them, you need far fewer sales to hit your revenue goal. So you decide what your revenue goal is, and then just work backwards and figure out, okay, well, assume 30% profit margin. How many sales do I need to make of a £10 item to hit my target of 5K a month profit, 10K a month profit? How many items do I need to sell at £2,000 with a 30% margin? If you're making £600 net profit per sale, you're going to need far fewer sales, because each one contributes such a higher chunk of that overall profit goal that you're striving for, that you don't need as many. Rather than chasing hundreds of those small sales, you can instead just focus on high value sales that make a real difference to your business and to your customer as well. Remember this, like, we're not just saying this because it's easy for you as the business owner. The unwritten kind of read between the lines bit of this is that the end customer can be served to such a higher standard if they are only one of 3 customers per day that you have to deal with. You could give them the most VIP experience. You could give them a call. You could send them a nice email. You could send them a nice little gift hamper. If you're making £600 profit on a sale, you could You could do all kinds of great things to wow them, get a great review, and leave them with such a great experience that they kind of have no choice but to recommend you to their friends. Versus, how are you going to do that if you're needing to make like 200-300 sales per day at a low £10 or £20 item? You're just not going to be able to. You're going to be overwhelmed with admin, with complaints, with refund requests, with issues. Your supplier in China is not going to help you with any of that. And so for me, when I realized that, it was just a no-brainer. I lent in the direction of making that smart decision.
And I had to see it as well to believe it, to realize that selling a high ticket item is exactly the same effort as selling a low ticket item. And it doesn't sound like common sense. You have to see it to really understand that it's exactly the same, but the rewards are so much higher. And this is a mistake that I wish I knew earlier, because if I had done, I could have saved so much headaches. And also, I was working so hard to generate some sales, but because they were so low ticket, all of that hard work I was putting in, I was getting no reward at the end of the month. And I look back at my statement and I could see that I'd made like a decent number of sales, but because the profit was so low per sale, it was wiped out by ad spend very quickly. And all of that work, every customer still needs a lot of attention. And even if you're, selling low ticket items, you're still having to serve lots of customers, fulfill lots of orders. And yeah, I think you need to be a much better operator to sell and start running a low ticket business compared to a high ticket business. So that's, the success that I've seen is much more in high ticket rather than low ticket. It's my experience all the way. Another mistake that we see, and it's quite closely tied to selling low ticket items, is working with suppliers for products overseas who are poor quality. So poor quality suppliers. Why is this mistake such a big pitfall?
Yeah, well, first thing to say is I'm not necessarily suggesting that all suppliers who are overseas from the UK are poor quality, but there are some that are. So let's just talk about those for a start, right? If you're dealing with overseas suppliers who are also poor quality in terms of, low quality checks on products and stuff's going out that's broken, or, it's got product issues already, then you'll often end up with those products that are leading to high return rates, because customers will just say, well, I want to return the item, it's no good. And they have a legal right to do so, but you try sending that item back to your supplier in China, or having the customer send it back to them in China. Firstly, they're not going to do it because the customer won't want to pay for shipment. The supplier's not going to cover that price of shipment. Are you going to? You're probably better just taking a loss on the product and saying to the customer. So that's why if you've ever ordered anything that's like really cheap and nasty and there's probably been drop shipped to you from like an Instagram ad you saw, and you've asked for a refund, sometimes the seller will just say, just keep it. It's fine, just keep it. And you'll see that happen quite frequently. And the clue is they were drop shipping, most likely, because they don't have anywhere for you to return it to. And it just doesn't make economical sense for them to do so. To think how many of those you're going to have to just keep passing out and refunding. And eventually, this is another bit they don't tell you, when your refund rate gets too high, Shopify, the system that you're using, or whichever payment processor you're using, don't like that. And so they see a spike in your refund rate, they're going to put a hold on your account and hold your funds and say, well, we don't want to take the risk that all of those sales that we've paid out to you suddenly end up in refunds. So we're going to hold back 10%, 15%, 50% of your funds. Or they might just say, we're closing you down altogether, shutting down your business, right? So it's really, really short-sighted to do it. And it's like building a house based with cheap materials. It might look the part, but then it's going to start falling apart over time after a couple of years, if that. The other thing is the suppliers might be good. So I said that that doesn't mean just because they're overseas that they're necessarily poor quality. Some are, but some could be good. You could actually have a really good great quality overseas supplier. But the issue with that is that no one wants to wait forever for their order to arrive. If you go to a really like Michelin star fancy restaurant and you sit down and you're thinking this is going to be amazing, it's going to be so good, the food's so highly rated, and you order and you're sitting there and you're like, I'm getting really hungry now, and it's like half an hour's gone by, 45 minutes has gone by, an hour's gone by, like hour and a half, 2 hours, and your food finally comes out after like 2.5, 3 hours and you're starving. Doesn't really matter how good the food is at that point, does it? Because your experience has been soured. You were the customer and the supplier took too long, even though the quality was good, right? So it's the same thing in e-commerce. Fast, reliable shipping is going to be key to keeping customers happy. That's why if you work with UK suppliers, or certainly domestic suppliers who are in the same country as the customers that you are shipping the items to, there's no ships involved. It just goes on land. It just goes in a back of a courier van or something, and the supplier just send it directly out, so it can be there the very next day. Makes it so much easier for you. So the other thing is dealing with suppliers in different time zones, different language barriers. Lacking accountability because there's no like face-to-face trust, or you're not speaking to them, you're not meeting them. It's all done over like a translated messenger chat on AliExpress or something, and it's just suddenly they disappear for Chinese New Year or something, and you're just left without any supplier who can fulfill your products for that time period. So there are all kinds of issues that arise once you're in that business model. So we're just trying to kind of point those out to you well in advance. If you're at that current fork in the road and you're thinking about going down that route, working with local suppliers not only improves the customer communication, but it's also your communication with your supplier, which you will rely on as a business, because you'll need that supplier from time to time. It also ensures that they have accountability. I could pick up the phone to my supplier and give them a call. In fact, I did yesterday. There was an issue with that a customer was having, and I thought, I can't, it's been back and forth on email. I'm just going to call the supplier. So just called the director and just had a quick chat, and we're probably one of their best retailers. It was fixed within 5 minutes. Like, that can't happen with a supplier from China, especially if the items are causing problems frequently because they're low quality. So quite a few things there to unpack, I think.
Lots of reasons why, even if the supplier is really great quality, got great quality products, loads of quality checks, even if they have the fastest possible shipping time from that side of the world, even if they've got the best people working for them, there's still going to be things that are consistent no matter what, who you work with overseas. There'll still be longer delivery time compared to if you're working with domestic suppliers, and there'll still be a more difficult language barrier. And I've got stories about that. When I work with overseas suppliers, I had a return that went, so the product was ordered from China to Canada, and obviously I was based in the UK, so I had this product sent, poor quality, customer didn't like it, or it broke the first time they used it. It was in Canada, and then I asked them, the only place they could possibly return it to was me in the UK, so I asked them to return it to me in the UK, which, because I didn't know what I was doing at that time, or how to handle returns, and it had done this big round trip. I lost a load of money out of all of it because I had to refund the customer, didn't get a refund from the supplier because they wouldn't accept the return back in China. And the whole process was timely, it cost me time, it cost me money, and it gave me headaches, and it was a poor quality experience. But that is very difficult to overcome. There's not many ways to go around that if you are working with products that are being sent around the world. And also, I remember sending emails to overseas suppliers with that language barrier, and sometimes I would send an email and the response would be to a completely different question, or it would be in a new thread, and it just wouldn't be consistent. And I can say that now because I know what it's like working with domestic suppliers with the same language, and you can just go back and forth easily with them to get a real good service for your customers. When your customers have a great service, you've got a great business that customers will return back to. So some lessons learned, and something that we can say upfront now is best to avoid, because you do have the luxury of choice and you can work with suppliers in the same country as your customers. So finally, one of the biggest mistakes that we see a lot of new dropshippers make is that they try and do it all alone. And I definitely fell into this camp. So what is the risk of trying to do everything on your own, Lewis?
We're not saying it can't be done. Again, these things will come with caveats. You can certainly do it alone. And going solo means relying solely on your own interpretation and your own understanding and your own experiences and your own challenges that you've faced. So it's very one-dimensional. It's like, if you haven't encountered the problem before and you come up against it, that's where you get stuck. I think the other thing is having no support system. It's easy to get discouraged and lose momentum. I know this morning I went out for a run, because we're recording this podcast quite early in the morning. So I went out for a run, and it was like dark, it was raining, it was grey. And whilst I still did it, that was driven by my own willpower, Whereas when I go to the gym most mornings, I get there and it's bright, there's music on, there's loads of people working out. You almost forget that an outside world exists when you walk into that environment, because everyone else is they're all up at 6 a.m, they're all in the gym, they're all working hard. And so you almost feel like guilty if you're not, and it just, you rise up to the standard and the level of the other people in the room. Same thing with a community. If you're the one who's running out in the dark 5:30 a.m. rain on your own, yeah, you can do that. Yeah, you can train like that if you want to, but you don't have to. Yes, you can rely just on your own willpower to get you through to seeing results. You will come up against many, many challenges along the way, or you can just be around a supportive group of people that make it fun, where you can enjoy the journey, where you can meet, share stories, share challenges, and get past it like that. So I think that's the difference between trying to make it alone. And that's where so many people fall down, because willpower only takes you so far. There's only so many days I'm going to go and run out in the pouring rain before I eventually get just disheartened and miserable with it. And so that's the thing. Collaborating with others opens doors. It opens doors to partnerships. There's new insights that you'll take on board, resources that you just wouldn't have even had otherwise. There's, what they say about you don't know what you don't know. That's the danger, I think, with working alone. You go through it in this one-dimensional tunnel vision approach, and you don't know the things that you're missing on the sidelines that could double, triple, quadruple your business, because no one ever showed them to you because you weren't around the right people. I think that's the danger.
It is. I think ego comes into this, thinking that you can work it all out on your own. It certainly was for me. I thought I could watch a few YouTube videos, I'd work it out, I'd do it on my own. I don't need to ask for help, and I will just sort it out. I'll work it out. But it makes it so much more difficult for you. You lose out on all of those shortcuts. It's like going to a supermarket and deciding that you're going to find all of the products on the shelves yourself, when you could just go to somebody that works there, shop assistant, and ask them to show you where things are and how much quicker you can get around the shop. It's like building a fantastic e-commerce business. It's also a lot more fun. I mean, having friends that you make, or partnerships that you create through getting in communities, makes the whole experience a lot more enjoyable. And that's important, because then you'll keep doing it. And it's the consistent action over time that gets amazing results. So to recap, some really common mistakes that we see, and that I wish I'd have seen this all before I got started to avoid some real common pitfalls. We'll recap those now. So don't dabble was a big one. Take it seriously. Base your product choices on data, not just a hunch or emotion. Avoid low ticket items and prioritize making a lot of profit with every single order. The next one is to choose reliable suppliers from the start. And finally, don't go it alone. Make it a more enjoyable process the whole way through. Because building an e-commerce business should be enjoyable, should be great fun. You should enjoy it. And the whole time you should be making a lot of profit for having a good time. So you don't have to make it difficult for yourself. There is a better way than struggling through it and trying to work it out on your own.
Yeah, well summed up, James. I think implementing some of the strategies that we've talked about today can set anyone on the path to building a successful and profitable dropshipping business. Not saying it's going to be easy, but the path to do so can be very simple, and it can be a lot easier than trying to figure it all out yourself. So if you want a bit of a head start and the strategy that we've talked about kind of fully laid out for you, I've written a book called The Home Turf Advantage. That's the model that we teach. And that covers everything from setting up your store to picking your niche, picking which products to sell, the different criteria we talked about for niche validation, all the way through to scaling up your business effectively while avoiding the common mistakes and pitfalls, the unknown unknowns that we talked about, and some of the ones we've discussed today. So you can get your copy of the book at htabook.com. And when you do so, you can also join our supportive community of like-minded entrepreneurs, all striving for success, so that you are surrounded by other people on the same journey as you.
Enjoying the podcast? We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment or a review, and we might just feature it on an upcoming episode. Also, for detailed show notes and resources, head to dropshipunlock.com/podcast.
If you found value from any episode of this podcast, please take just 10 seconds to leave us a quick 5-star review on your podcast app of choice. It helps us more than you could imagine. And who knows, you might just hear your comments on the show. Thanks for being part of our community. Your support helps us keep delivering a new episode every week.
Now, let's answer a question that we've had in from a listener of the podcast. Remember, if you're listening now and you have a question that you'd like to ask, simply comment beneath the YouTube video version of this episode. And as well as getting your comment answered in the comment section, we might just answer it on an upcoming podcast episode as well. So this week's question comes in from Anthony Green, 1190. And he has asked, he said, great video. Nice to see how you called the suppliers, but it would also be nice to see the email content that you send to new suppliers.
Thanks for your question, Anthony. So glad to hear that you enjoyed the video on the YouTube channel where I recorded myself calling suppliers. So if you haven't seen that one, we'll link that one in the show notes for this episode. It's part 2, I believe, of our series, or part 3 of our series that we did, a 3-part series of creating the store, picking the niche, calling the suppliers, signing the first few suppliers. So I went through it. For anyone that wants to watch it, it's called I Started a New Dropshipping Business from Scratch. So you can access that on YouTube. Now start with part 1 and work your way through it. It's a good series. It took a lot of time to put together. But to answer your question, there are 2 types of emails that I would send to suppliers to get them signed up with us. Now, the first one is if the phone call, and I always start with a phone call because that's just the best way to get to the top of the pile for suppliers, and get front of mind. If the phone call had been successful and they're just now asking for our business information, in this case, I'll provide my company details with contact information. So just a basic standard template email. We provide that for you inside the Dropship Unlocked program, like the exact templates to send. Second type of email is if we need to provide a bit more information. Maybe they aren't quite sold on our proposal at this stage. In that email, I'd simply just introduce myself and explain my e-commerce business. I'd express interest in partnering with the supplier. I'd explain that maybe we plan to use various marketing strategies to promote their products and operate by selling directly to customers through our website, with the supplier handling the order fulfillment. But the key thing is that I would very, very clearly articulate what the benefits are for them, like what's in it for them. We can provide another source of revenue for you. We'll pay you cash up front for every order that comes through, because remember, we'll have sold the product first, so we'll have the cash from the customer already to pay for it. We will make it really easy for you to deal with, and we'll make sure that we're selling, at a level price with your other retailers so that we don't upset any of them. Like all things that the supplier wants to hear. So you highlight those things, request any necessary documentation to set up the partnership. And at that point, I try and then follow that up with a phone call again in the next few days, try and, speak to them. Sometimes I'll go and meet the supplier. They'll say, yeah, why don't you just pop in? Might be a 2-hour drive, might be just down the road. Either way, I'm probably going to do it because you only have to do that once. And then you've secured that relationship and you might work with that supplier for the next decade, all because you got in the car and made a trip that someone else couldn't be bothered to do. That's the difference. So sometimes it's as simple as that. You might go back and forth a little bit while they're kind of figuring out answers to a few of the questions. And I think that should really help you sign some top quality suppliers. So I hope that helps.
Perfect. Yeah, great question, Anthony. Thanks for your answer, Lewis. Knowing exactly how to sign these domestic suppliers that we're talking a lot about in today's episode. So we'll also highlight a recent review that we've had for the podcast as well, because we love seeing the reviews, and also it's nice to give you a shout out if you do leave a review for us at the end of this episode. So a big thank you to Shan for sharing your thoughts in an Apple podcast review. And Shan said, great insight into the world of e-commerce, some good advice on how to break the 9-to-5 shackles.
Thank you so much for your review, Shan. Really glad to hear that you've been enjoying the podcast. Before we wrap up today, I wondered if you could help us with a quick favor. If you've enjoyed today's episode, could you take a moment to leave us a review? Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and improve our content. Plus, we might just read your review out in our next episode.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you're walking away with insights and inspiration.
To kickstart your e-commerce journey, grab a copy of my book, The Home Turf Advantage, at htabook.com. It's a distilled guide based on real experience to help you build your e-commerce venture.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more strategies and success stories. And if you like what you heard, a 5-star review would mean the world to us, and you might just get a shout out on an upcoming episode.
And finally, thank you for deciding to spend your time with us today. We can't wait to bring you more insights on the next episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast.